commercial industrial properties that the impact is a lot greater. And that's, to me, that 3.9 don't mean a lot, I guess, in my eyes. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll get to that at page 12. Good question, but we'll be having more on that further in the document. Kathy, continue. Oh, do you want to clarify something? Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council, I just want to remind, though, Council, that we do talk in terms of the typical residential property tax impact, because residential properties in Norfolk County pay 80% of the tax levy, and that's why we use that. So it is meaningful from that standpoint.
Yes, go ahead.
That's fine. I understand that. But if you talk to some of the people that own commercial property and you realize what they pay in taxes, maybe it's, in some respects, why some of these businesses aren't here any longer. It all adds up. I guess I can tell you there's some commercial properties that are not that big that are paying substantial amounts of money, and if it's a 1% or a 2% rise in the tax to their property, it does add up, and it's difficult to pay that. So anyway, leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. History, Kathy?
The next slide, or chart, provides a summary of the approved levy increases since 2012. The net levy is the net increase required to operate the county to provide all the local municipal services that we are providing at this time. Or in other words, it's the amount of tax dollars needed to run our business. It's not the actual tax rate. You'll see the increases have run from 2012 from 2% to 2015 approved 4.8% tax levy increase, to this year, at this point in time, 5.6%.
Mr. Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that, Kathy, I thought I understood, and I may now be confused, but if I look at the 2016 approved, and it's asterisk there with the special levy, which I presume was the allocation towards the hospital, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the total amount that we levied to our taxpayers in 2016 was $76,897, and that included a $500,000 allocation for the hospital, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
We're now proposing $81,207,400. Does that or does that not include a $500,000 allocation to the hospital?
That does not.
So in other words, Mr. Mayor, we have increased by that 4.3 million, but we have actually removed a $500,000 charge for the hospital contribution. So the rest of our county programs have not only benefited from a 5.6% increase, but have they not also benefited from $500,000 that we previously were committing to the hospital, and now we're funding it elsewhere? So if that makes any sense to my colleagues, I'm trying to say, I think in a way, that other than our commitment to the hospital, this levy reflects more than a 5.6% increase. Well, I would never say that, Councillor. But the point is, somehow or another, the $500,000 that we gave to the hospital, theoretically, last year, we've still got in there this year, but we're using it ourselves. Is that a fair representation of what's in those two lines?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it actually offsets some things like increases in transfers to reserves and increased principal and interest on debt.
The point is that $500,000 is still in this budget, and we're finding $500,000 for the hospital somewhere else. Correct? Thank you.
That's correct. Yes, thank you. Anything else? Okay, continue, Kathy.
The next slide is just a summary of some changes that takes place for assessment and tax impacts. Some of the items that change in assessment includes revised current value assessment for CVAs, also growth in assessment for new properties, less any adjustment for assessment appeals. I believe the tax rate policy is not approved until during the month of April. And right now, as we mentioned earlier, the estimated reduction in education tax rates for 2007, we're using 4%, and John's pretty comfortable with that rate that we've used. Sorry, the next chart is just a history of the assessment growth. You'll see the assessment growth has ranged from 2012 at 0.69% up to 1.33% in 2013. And for 2017, our assessment growth is 0.75%. That equates to about $600,000 in new tax dollars for 2017.
Yes, Councillor Broughton.
If I may, Kathy, can you back up there for a minute? You said, can you repeat that, what you said about 2.75 again? You said that's assessment growth.
Real growth.
Real growth. But what about the change in market value?
Was the 2.1?
Am I ahead of myself or behind?
I'll get that number.
2.1, about 62 million, I think.
Like I would think if you included market value, wouldn't that figure be a lot higher than 0.75, or am I off base on that?
No, you're through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Breton's, excuse me, Councillor Breton's actually correct. The growth as a result of the CVA change,
Right?
okay? The change in market values. We cannot use that to reduce taxes.
I'm not saying, but
Okay.
it has an impact, doesn't it?
The change is about 2.3% for the CVA values.
Up,
Yes, correct.
right?
But all that does is that just rearranges the previous tax rate because we can't take advantage of that assessment increase.
I
We can only
realize-
take advantage of the 0.75% assessment increase because that's new assessment.
I realize that, but the 2.75 you referred to, you can't use it, but the taxpayer gets dinged with it, do they not? Well,
Oh, in the arithmetic, what we do is we take that CVA value, the
Yeah.
new CVA value, and we change the opening tax rate, reduce the opening
Down.
tax rate,
okay,
so that when you apply that to the new CVA values, the theory is that your individual taxes should not change because of the change in CVA value.
okay, I didn't realize.
If, and the big catch here is if your assessment increase matches the average. If your assessment went up higher, your CVA value went up higher, you will have a tax impact. If it went down, if it went up less than the average, you will actually have a windfall.
Gotcha.
But when you look at the whole of all of the assessment, excuse me, the total amount of taxes generated in 2016 on those tax rates will equal X dollars.
Right,
When we revise the rate and apply that rate to the 2017 value, it equals X dollars.
okay, I get you. Thank you.
Okay,
We do represent 7.75% increase.
And new growth,
That's new growth, and that does affect the lowering this year's tax rate.
right,
But the
Thank-
CVA change has no effect on it.
unless yours is higher than the average. Thank you.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to the treasurer. The assessment growth itself, say we all own properties and our properties go up in value 10%. And that is what you call assessment growth? Or what I'm after really is what are the financial figures for new development?
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, let me answer Councillor Height's question this way. In that example you just gave, Councillor Height, you said that your assessment value went up by 10%. That's a CVA increase. If you added, put an addition onto your building, and you got new assessment of, let's say, $2,000, that's part of the new assessment or assessment growth. And if somebody down the street built a new house, that's assessment growth. So there's two components to the assessment that we receive, the MPAC assessment. One increase is the CVA value. We call that inflation because it's easier to understand. And the second one is real growth. The real growth is 0.75%. So our assessment in total went up 7.5% as a result of new stuff. Additions to your building, the new house down the street, those kinds of things.
Yeah,
Less,
but, John, it's .75.
did I say?
You said 7.5, but I just,
Oh,
I didn't want...
0.7. I'd love it to be
The eyes
7.5.
got big when you said 7.
I'd love it to be 7.5.
That's okay, I knew what you meant,
It's
but I wanted...
.75. That's increase in new assessment, brand new, first time on the roll, less anything where MPAC has made a reduction because a building was torn down. Those changes are reflected in that 0.75%. The CVA number, all it's doing is you got the CVA value and the tax rate, the tax levies here. When we changed it, it's in the same position. They've all just moved a little bit.
Okay, so when I look at these numbers, in 2016, we had a growth of 1.19, and now we're at 0.75, so we're down in new growth.
No, we're up in new growth. Last year, we had 1.9% increase in new stuff, new assessment.
Yeah.
That's now in the 2016 assessment base. That assessment base went up 2.3% in total. In addition to that, we have 0.75 of new stuff. So our assessment hasn't gone down, it's gone up.
Okay, so what I'm trying to compare it to is, say, our operating costs. If this budget claims to be a flat line, there are no new service increases. So as you have assessment growth on the new building side of things, they're still paying for the operating costs for the original assessment growth for the regular residents. So doesn't that, do you see what I'm saying there? No. Okay, as you get growth and more people build houses, those people that we brought on 244 houses last year, those people are now paying for an operating budget that was very similar, like they're not receiving an extra service, it's just they're sharing the load.
Let me see if I can explain back the way I think what you're asking. Last year's budget was, what was the number, Kathy? Last year's net tax levy was $76,897,000. If the tax levy for 2017 was $76,897,000, and we had a 0.75% increase in assessment, the actual amount that we require from the taxpayer would go down, because we've now got more assessment against which that 76 million is applied. Can you get that slide up? Right there.
Yeah.
The approved levy is 76.9 million. Based on that total amount of assessment we had, it drove a tax rate of 4.6% increase. If we had $76.9 million as the total levy in 2017, that 4.6% would probably be 4.3, maybe 3.8%, 3.9%, because we would have more assessment upon which the $76 million has to be collected. What happens is we need $3 million more to run the business. We only got a 0.75% increase in the amount of additional assessment to pay for that $3 million, so everybody else has to pay more.
Right. Right. So if we had a large growth spurt, something like 10%, that would definitely help spread the pain across all the taxpayers. Is that correct?
If we had a 10% increase in new assessment, new houses, new buildings, and all the rest of that stuff, we may not have a tax increase at all.
All right. That's what I thought.
Because you've got that much extra money that we need to run the business, but you've got a 10% higher amount of the denominator value to apply that requirement on. I'd love to have a 10% increase.
So we should be looking at growth, pushing for growth to help reduce this percentage increase.
And that's really what everybody wants to see happen, is that new business, new housing, new business, additions to business happen, because that does increase that denominator value.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Robichaud?
Yes, I think Councillor Height's question is a good one, but I think we have to look at the fact that our residential property tax assessment totals $6 billion. So to bump that by 10% would require growth and new development of $600 million. And you know, to some degree, there is capacity in some of our services to absorb some of that growth, but there are things like, for example, you know, if you have more subdivision streets, eventually you're going to have more contracted out routes and more standby charges. You're going to have every year you add more stops to your garbage and recyclables collection, and so to the extent that some of our services have capacity to absorb that growth, the only increase that those new taxpayers will share with existing taxpayers is the inflationary increase in costs. But you know, at some point, there are certain programs and services like garbage collection, like street, for example, winter maintenance of streets that, you know, you will have to add, obviously, to your cost for delivering the service, not just the inflationary increases in the cost of those services.
Councillor Geisens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at CVA values, and I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, and I can use my own example, there will be some people that may actually get a lower tax because of the assessment that's coming on. Is that correct? Could that possibly happen?
Absolutely. An average is just that. It's an average of all of the highs and all of the lows. It's 2.3%. So if your assessment, if your new CVA value went up less than 2.3%, went up 1.5%, for example, relative to everybody else, your taxes will go down. If your CVA value went up higher than 2.3%, let's say 4.3%, then relative to everybody else, your taxes will go up. If you sit right on 2.3%, change to change, year to year, you shouldn't see any change in the base amount. You will see an increase, however, because the base amount's increasing from 76 million to 81 million, or whatever number council approves. So, I mean, there's like 3 or 4 or 5 different components that are acting at the same time, and so it gets to be a little more complicated. Like, for instance, the spreadsheets that we produce to come up with the tax rates, they're incredibly complex.
I believe that. My circumstances are that my assessment has gone up by about 70%, so somewhere along the line, my taxes are going to go up substantially, but that's just the way it is, I guess. Thank you.
Councillor Columbus next.
The farm really got hit this year.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, to John, what I'm struggling with is this item for taxation in 2017, 0.75%, and we've been hearing from Mr. Baird's department over the last couple of years about all these building permits and a lot of building activity going on, yet we're only increasing by 0.75 versus the previous year was 1.19. Can you explain that to me? Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, no, you're not interpreting it incorrectly. Our assessment base went up by about 3, let me see if I can, by about, looking strictly at the CVA value, about $400 million. That's a lot of properties. And we can, if you had 200 houses being built, for example, 200 houses, and let's say they're $250,000 each, that's only $50 million in assessment. $50 million in assessment's hardly going to move the percentage scale. Because we're dealing with a base that's $8.4 billion. So to increase that by, to increase it by 10%, as Keith said, you need $840 million. So we end up with a whole lot of building permits could be issued. We could build 200 houses this year, and if the average price of them's 250 grand, our assessment base is going to go up $50 million. Well, that's nothing to sneeze at, but when you look at a total assessment base of $8 billion, the percentage is, that's how you end up with a 0.75 or a 0.5% increase. That's part A answer. Part B answer is that the MPAC assessment trails the building permit issuance. So we issue a building permit, we're in January right now. We issued a building permit right now to build a residence. They start work in March, be finished in September, maybe October for occupancy. That assessment will not be available in 2017. It may be available in 2018. We don't control MPAC. We feed them the information, and they act as fast and as expeditiously and all the rest that they can, but there's always a lag behind it. So you got two forces there. One of them is the lag, and the other one is the relative size.
And when you occupy a new home, it can take up to a year to get your first tax bill.
So for next year, we may see that over 1%, possibly.
That's correct.
Thanks.
I have Oliver and then Brunton, please.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Columbus just asked my question.
Mr. Brunton, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. John, just not counting the 0.75, which is new, and I realize it affects individual properties, but can you tell me the CVA, whether it's up or down on the average? Is that a fair question? Did I miss that point?
Through Mr. Mayor, let me give you a macro number.
All right.
The 2016 total return roll for assessment was $8.3 billion.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the total of all assessment. I don't care what kind it is, it's everything.
Yep.
Not weighted, not in his raw assessment, $8.3 billion. When we go and look at the 2017 returned roll, so that's, again, that's comparing apples and apples, it's whoops, just a second here, I gotta go I went the wrong way. It's roughly $8.6, $8.7 billion. Okay. So yes, it's gone up.
Yeah.
However, there's 47 different classes within that. Some are up, some are down, some are up more than others, some are down more than others. But overall, our assessment base went from 8.3 billion to 8.6 billion.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Okay. The next slide gives us the history of the average residential tax bill historical layout from 2012. You'll see the average is 1.7 over the last 5 years. It's from a low of 2.8%. Or 0.8% in 2013 to a high of 2.3% in 2015. And you'll see at the right-hand side of the chart, this year, at this point in time, the 2017 proposed is recommending a 3.9% increase. Just for council's information, we're looking at full-time equivalent employees also, so we do have a chart layout here of the history from 2012 to 2016. The details of that information is under tab 2, I believe, if you require any further information on any changes for 2017. Just to note on the FTEs, that is just the increase in the number of employees. It has no correlation to the dollars amount. So a number of these changes that have occurred between these years are mandatory positions that have been included in the budget. And a number of them are also funded 100% or partially funded or offset by other revenues or reserve funds.
Mr. Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to Ms. LaPlante. These are the FTEs that we have approved. How do we see figures of the FTEs that actually work here? Because, for example, okay, our county manager is leaving us. It's going to take us 4 months to hire somebody. So there's a gap. And in that gap, over an employee base of 752.77 proposed, I'm sure we have a lot of these ins and outs. So how does staff, or how do we see which positions are not filled?
Through the mayor to Councillor Height, we do have a dollar amount for gapping because we do expect throughout the year there will be gapping for positions due to staff turnover. We also do have, when these positions are actually the approved position, because it's an approved full-time equivalent, we don't actually take it right out of the budget because it is a full-time position that will be rehired. I can get you the figure that we have included for gapping. Many times the gapping dollars will be used because if you are without certain individual positions for a length of time, there are some temporary help or assistance that staff may or departments may decide to bring in that actually uses up some of the gapping dollars.
Right, that's how you burn the money in the overtime while still having a gap from the empty position. Now, do we have a policy in place to handle gapping, and when can we see that report from you?
Not to my knowledge, through the mayor to Councillor Hart, not to my knowledge do we have a policy related to gapping.
Okay, when would we be able to get a report on how it's handled by the departments? Or
Through
more
Mr. Mayor,
information?
I don't understand what Councillor Height is looking for. You're looking for a policy with respect to gapping?
Correct.
So when, in the case of Mr. Robichaud, the county manager, he's going to be gone for arguably 3 or 4 months. I don't know how you'd write a policy on that when you say that when there's a position that's being replaced, that the gapping is, what would we do with that? We would put the money in a sock or something? I don't know how we could write a policy for something that is that vague.
Okay, many municipalities have it, including Waterloo for that matter, but what I'm saying is, okay, say you're looking for a very specialized person and you can't find one. That position stays empty, it could stay empty for years. That money stays in that budget because it's still on the FTE books, yet it's being burned in overtime in other sections by that job still needs to get done, or part of that job needs to get done. So someone else in that department's picking it up, but that position is never filled.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure burned is the word I'd use, but
Right.
I'm,
I would.
I fully understand that. If we have a specialized position and we're not able to fill it for whatever good and holy reason, that work still needs to be done.
Right.
I'm not certain that we would end up using excessive amounts of overtime. We would probably hire some junior person or less qualified person. I hate to use the word lower person because that's really disrespectful, but some person that doesn't have that skill set, and the more skilled tasks that need to be done would be farmed out amongst the other staff. We've done that in financial services, for example. We had a very key person who's on maternity leave. We didn't replace that person. Instead, what we did was we brought somebody in to deal with some of the lower level tasks, because we couldn't hire somebody that had the expertise to deal with the higher level tasks. And those higher level tasks were distributed along to some of the senior people in the department. And some of their tasks were put onto this person who was hired on a temporary basis. So we didn't change the number of FTEs, we changed the work that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And that would typically happen if you couldn't find somebody to replace a very specialized position. And again, I can speak very clearly about it from financial services because that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, Councillor Height, I understand the question you're saying, but I don't think we really, at least I can't speak for staff, but the time involved to sort of calculate or figure out when somebody leaves a job, not knowing how long it's going to take to replace. Certainly when in this budget is a full salary proposed for the position of county manager. We know that we will not have a county manager, so for a few months, don't know how long, 2, 3, 4 months, who knows, but we leave the total amount of that salary for the most part in there. We happen to know right now that we'll be saving that, it'll come as a surplus, but we have nothing down the road at this point when we approve this budget that next month another person could move on, or retirements, et cetera. So, you know, this graph here simply says approved staff. It does not talk about the dollars. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. And I am talking about the dollars, because, for example, if I had 55 staff under me, and it takes 8 weeks to fill a position,
Yes.
there's savings in those 4 months, basically, worth of salaries. So if I'm the department head and my costs are $10 million in salaries, and there's positions, there's retirements, and that fluctuates. Usually if somebody retires, I would hope that we're finding someone that's a little more economical, because the other ones have gone up the pay scale.
Right.
So there's savings in there. So when I do my budget and I come in at $11 million the very next year, it sort of skews the numbers, because my overall cost was $9.5 million that year because of that. So you're basing a number on moving ahead and not the actuals.
I won't argue
It's
that on the
substantial.
actuals. I won't
It
argue.
can be substantial.
I get your point.
Councillor Heights describes something that is, that happens every day. You know, we have people retiring, and we have people going off on, you know, a variety of different leaves, and we have junior people are coming in at the lower rate on the pay scale. That, I mean, that's the price that not the price you pay. That's how a dynamic workforce exists. We have an amount in the budget as a credit in corporate for $220,000 to recognize that there is money that we have in the salary budget that we're not going to use. So we've got a credit over here of $220,000. We haven't for a very long time rationalized that number, because typically what happens is I've got a position in my shop that's the person is has left, retired, whatever the case may be, and I'm going to hire somebody at an entry level rate, or a step 2 or a step 3 rate, whatever the case may be. But in the meantime, it's taken 4 months to hire that person, so I got to get some work done, so I'm going to go out and hire somebody temporarily. And I may hire that person at a very entry-level rate, and there'd be a difference between the two. That's the gap. And over here, we've put a credit for $220,000 in the budget to cover the amount of money that you're not paying over here.
Okay,
It's not as scientific as it should be or could be, but it's very difficult to determine when I have that clerk or that accountant in my shop who's going away, how much that money is. Because the very next month that somebody else goes away, it'll be a different number.
Kathy, do you want to proceed? I think we've got the gist here of these are simply the approved positions and not dollar amounts.
The next slide is a summary of the proposed 2017 adjusted budget. Again, this is in your budget document in the financial services report. It's the 2017 adjusted budget. It maintains the same level of service from 2016. It's adjusted for inflationary increases in costs of existing levels of service. It incorporates any changes included in capital expenditures, or as a result of the capital budget being approved back in October of last year. So this budget is actually essentially it's a 2016 budget in 2017 dollars. You'll see it results in an overall increase of 5.12%. That's reflected in tab 4 under column 4 on page 4-3 under the column entitled 2017 adjusted budget. You can see our base starting last year's approved budget was $76,897,000. One of the adjustments that we've already spoke about is the special levy for Norfolk General Hospital. That has been removed from the budget. We had some phase-in direction from decisions that were made last year for waste management costs, fire protection costs, and leachate costs. These represent a 1.22% increase for 2017. Then we have a number of different uncontrollable budget impacts, base budget adjustments. These are basically your CPI contracts that are already negotiated, any decrease in or increases in funding. The net results are just over $2.5 million for a 3.27% increase. There are a number, these items are also outlined in more detail in the financial services report under tab 1. And the next area is the council or departmental controllable adjustments. These generally are like winter control, et cetera. It totals $500,600. And the last driver are the proposed requisitions from boards and agencies, a net increase of $483,300. And as you see when we go through the budget document, the majority of the increase is a result of an increase in the police services contract. For a total proposed 2017 adjusted budget of $80,839,000. The next, this is where we were talking about the assessment. As a result of a business-as-usual budget, the average residential property tax impact would equate to 3.5%. You'll notice the second column in the chart, in the table, is under assessment. That's where we were talking earlier about the increase in the average assessment. In 2016, it was $215,000. For the 2017 proposed levy, it's $220,250, for an increase over 2016 of $5,250, for a 2.4% increase. Again, this is the increase on a business-as-usual budget, providing the same level of services as in 2016. The next area, you do have a separate budget, a separate supplemental package called New Budget Initiatives and Council-Approved Initiatives. From that, the council-approved initiatives are adjustments that we've made throughout the year to the council-approved budgets. Generally, council will approve some budget amendments, and these are now included in under council-approved adjustments. It's a separate column in all the documents. The other area is the new budget initiative area. These are proposals for actual changes in level of services. It's reviewed by SLT. There's a ranking criteria used. It's all these details of the MBIs and the CAIs are actually included in this document. The MBIs are ranked 1, 2, or 3. If they are, they're included in the dollar amounts in the budget document. If they're ranked 4, there's a listing for you in case you would like to refer to these or bring any of these back to council for consideration. But they are not included in the dollar amount for the tax levy. The total of the new budget impact is $355,000. And each of these NBIs will be reviewed individually when through the departmental reviews.
Mr. Brunton?
I was wondering that, like, I know we come back at the end of last year and looked at these new budget initiatives, but the way it's laid out there, I wonder if we can deal with them as we do the line item. Is that what you're saying? Like, rather than do that at a later date, let's go right across, because they're all right there in front of us, and you show the impact levy-wise at the end of the line, as I call it. So.
Through the mayor to Councillor Brunton, most definitely. Like I mentioned, the departments will be reviewing these. I'm bringing them to your attention. They're in just two separate books.
I realize that, but
definitely reviewing them throughout the
Yes.
budget deliberations, and each
Okay.
departmental review would be great.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kathy, a couple more pages here.
Okay. So the next chart is actually starting our base. This is where the new budget initiatives we've talked about. The council approved initiatives equate to $13,300. The new budget initiatives, $355,100, for a total net levy request of $81,207,400, for a total of 5.6% increase. And again, the next chart is showing the typical average residential bill as a result of including the additional NBIs and CAIs. And again, the assessment numbers are the same, $215,000 for an average residential property in 16, and for 17, $220,250. The increase for a total average residential bill equates to $100.17. That includes a reduction in the education tax rate for a total of percentage change of 3.9% in tax rates. And that's the end of the presentation. If anyone else has any
I
other
don't know if
questions.
there's any other, Kathy, very well done. I don't know if there's any other questions. Councillor Oliver, at noon, I'm going to see if I can move this over. It's no fun not being able to see you and Mike. Is there any other questions on this? I think you've done a good job explaining our starting point here and how we got where we are. Okay, we'll just pause for a second and talk about the next step here in getting right to these budgets. We're going to be taking half an hour, 40 minutes for lunch. What are you thinking? How fast can you eat? We'll take a half an hour thereabouts, whatever council decides for lunch. I'm not sure whether this is a good time. I would suggest that we do have the Board of Health budget here. I don't think it'll take long to get through this, although I don't know. That we start off, get this out of the way first, and then get to our binder. That's my suggestion. Your thoughts, other than leave it till later? You know when lunch will be ready? It's not here yet. It's not here. Would you like to start on the Board of Health now? We may get it knocked off by noon. I don't know. Everybody okay with that? Okay, if you would grab the Board of Health operating budget document, and there you are with the light on and ready to go. Marlene, I'm going to ask you, and Susan, good to see you here as well. Just to kind of give us some overall comments here on what's in here and get us started, okay?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Mayor. The Ministry of Health and Long-Term
Okay,
Care.
I'm sorry, I'm not following procedure here, I'll be right with you. I have now recessed council, and I would now open this Board of Health budget session. I needed to say that, thank you, Andrew. Now, are you okay now? Everything's good now? No? You're just doing your job. Sorry, Marlene.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care continues to utilize the funding formula for 2016 that proportionately allocated funding to 10 of the 36 health units that have not reached their model-based share. For the second year, the Huldum and Norfolk Health Unit has not received increases in funding, and the funding remains capped. Funding for the mandatory programs for 2017 are unknown at this time. The budget has been forecasted on the 2016 funding allocations. The funding formula has impacted the health unit 9.8 million gross budget that is showing an overall increase of 1.8% or $168,900 and a net levy increase of 16.8% or $352,800. It would be noted that the 2016 funding levels were adjusted to reflect the uploading of the SINA and the expanded dental fee-for-service costs to a third party. An adjustment of $254,000 were adjusted in 2016. We continue to provide dental services in the mandatory programs and the Healthy Smiles Ontario program. 2016 was a busy year with many accomplishments as individuals and as teams, despite the funding challenges and vacancies in leadership, with a change to focus on a positive culture, improved quality, and accountability. I would like to thank all the staff for all their efforts to ensure the level of services have been maintained and taking on additional responsibilities through 2016. I would also like to thank the finance team for their guidance and patience as they worked with our leaders as they developed their individual budgets for the first time this year. Public health has many unknowns moving forward into 2017 as we continue to await the modernization of the program standards, which have been delayed now and are expected to be announced in the spring. We are still awaiting a clear direction of Patient First and the impacts and the linkages of public health with the LHIN. Just a high-level overview of some of the cost drivers and challenges that we are facing for 2017 include the funding formula and the cap funding, as I've already spoken to, the implementation of the audit recommendations that has been approved by the Board of Health, the merit and economical increases, which equated to $153,700, which is reflective of the two collective agreements that are within public health. We continue to have ongoing vacancies and recruitment for frontline staff and leadership teams, and we have had a significant turnover in our leadership team throughout 2016. And we have included in this budget the reinstatement of the Alpha membership for your consideration and approval. With these changes and opportunities, staff will continue to work towards efficiencies and value for money as we work within the reality of the fiscal constraints and the legislative requirements. As staff implement our strategic plan, staff will realize our vision of building a healthy, vibrant, caring community for all. The strategic plan will guide our decisions as we shape the future of our community. And with that, we are open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and I am going to go to page 4 here, and it's a fair statement. It doesn't really make any difference in going through this, but this increase of $352,800, that is shared on a formula basis with Alderman, correct? Yeah, so our portion's roughly 60%.
Thank you.
Roughly. Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Columbus and then Height.
Mr. Mayor, Marlene has shared some important statistics and facts with us, and I just wondered, is that available? What you just read to us, could that be made available to us in printed form or somehow?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Columbus, I'd be happy to email that to the Board of Health.
You're going through it pretty quick, and I couldn't grasp it all. Thanks.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I'm looking down on page 5, and it's got Haldeman's share there. So the total increase is 352,800, and theirs is 125K. Is that correct? I can't hear you, Keith.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Height, could you just repeat that? I wasn't on that page when you were speaking.
Bottom right, page 5. Net levy requirement of 352. Is that not Norfolk counties?
That breaks down 125 to Haldeman and 227 to Norfolk.
227 for Norfolk? 227? No.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, you mentioned that the province funded 10 of the 38. Is that what was in that blur?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Height, that is correct. So additionally to that, for 2016, the province only allocated 1% overall to public health, where traditionally there's been a 2% increase, and only 10 of the 36 health units received additional funding.
And we did not?
And we did not.
So it was with that you're bringing the justification of a 16.8% increase to your budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Height, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further? Councillor Brunton? Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Oliver, I didn't see you there.
That's all right, Mr. Mayor. I thought you did at one point, but that's okay.
Okay, I see you now.
Yep, thank you very much. My question is somewhat similar to the last part of Councillor Height's to Marlene. Marlene, when we look at the total additional expenditures on page 5 for the implementation of the programs, it's increased by $168,900, which is only a small, relatively speaking, 1.8% increase, and yet the levy requirement is going up by this 16.8. So given the discussions that this board has had over the last year or two about the municipalities having to subsidize our cost share programs above and beyond the 0% for the 100% funded and the 25% for the 75% funded programs, are we now seeing with this budget even a greater spread than last year? So rather than going in the right direction, we might hope for it's getting worse, not better.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Oliver, I think I'll defer to our finance people if I could on that with all, we are going negatively. As I mentioned in my opening comments, there was a $254,000 adjustment for the dental uploading, so that has had an impact on our revenues coming in. So that's the most profound amount, and the fact that we received no increase, we've got it capped. So overall, our revenues have have stayed stagnant, and yet simply even from our collective agreements, our costs are going up. I'm not sure if finance wants to comment further.
Well, the only thing I could add, Mr. Mayor, is if you take a look at page 5, and look at the second from the right column, the overall total expenditures are going up $108,000.
$169.
$168,000. I tell you what, I need my glasses fixed. $168,900. And our revenue from the provincial grants, in particular, is going down almost $200,000. So the net effect of that is that the cost to Haldeman and Norfolk is going up by $350,000, round numbers. And that's because the funding is capped, and in some cases is not as good as we'd like it to be, and yet our costs are going up. And it's a simple number. Our costs are going up, our funding's going down. It's costing us $350,000 more to do the same thing to do the things that are in here. Does that mean that we have to do all the things that were in here? That's your decision.
Thank you for that to staff. And my final question, Mr. Mayor, on the same page, 5 and 6, I guess I'm slightly puzzled given the fact that the levy is having to increase by $352,800, which is a 16.8%, and yet the Haldeman share is only going up 14.3%, and ours is going up nearly 19%. Why the discrepancy? Why wouldn't they be increasing in the same proportion as has been the case?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Oliver, that's based on a formula of the cost sharing between Haldeman and Norfolk, and it's about a 60-40 split.
It's the 60-40 split, but it would have been there last year as well, would it not? So how is it that the 60-40 split isn't, if you like, identical this year? In other words, both of them going up 16.8% compared to last year.
I'm going to have to defer to finance to assist with the calculation on that.
Through the mayor to council, I believe Cecile may be able to help out on this because I know we've looked into it, but it is based on the population between the two municipalities. I'm not sure the exact percentage used in the calculation.
Year to year.
Yes.
Maybe 60-40 last year, this year is 61-39 kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Brun?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I've looked at this for some time here, and I think if you recall, and it bothers me that the figure, if you go down on, I'm on page 5 and 6 here. Total expenditures, 9.5 for 2000, and so, well, 9.6, almost 9.7, we'll say, in expenditures. And then we come down to the provincial grants, which are around 7 million, and those are certainly reduced this year because of the grant being cut back or not increased, whatever way you want to look at it. But that figure has increased every year that I've looked at this budget. And if you recall, when we did the audit, there was a clause in there that said very clearly, you do the best you can with the funds you receive from the province. Yet, we continue to subsidize the province with all these programs. I just find it unacceptable, Mr. Chairman, or Mayor Luke, that we have to continue to subsidize the province to do their work. And I would like to start and go through line by line here, and I want to see a breakdown. So I'll start with materials and supplies on that line item. So if somebody could put that up on the computer, and I want to start and look at it. It's $481,000. Can you bring that up?
So you're asking to have a look at materials and supplies?
That's correct. And then I'd like to go from there to contracted services. And I'm sorry, Your Worship, but to me, it's not acceptable to continue funding these things. But that's only my opinion. But I'll start with supplies and materials and supplies.
Are we able to put the detail up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we've got to make a couple technical
That's fine.
shifts here to do that.
Okay,
but yes, we can.
while we're waiting, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go down to our favorite topic, seminars and training, $117,000. I thought we were getting a report that dealt with all these things, a breakdown of where these seminars and training are, et cetera, et cetera. So is that coming, Your Worship, or is that still on the printing press, what's the word?
Well, I do know it is coming, and I think we'll ask the county manager when we can see it. And I won't forget to ask him when he returns.
Okay.
But going back to the materials and supplies, we'll have it up in a moment. And certainly you've mentioned that and contracted, and they are both being decreased this year, but still you want to know where this money's being spent, correct?
That's correct.
Anything else while we're waiting to get the screen up?
Well, actually, no, I guess I want to start and look at contracted services. I was hoping to get a better breakdown in the seminars and training, but you think the county manager will supply that? Well, okay, this is...
Councillor Brun, one comment I would make on, because I too am waiting for the seminar, training, conference cost that this municipality spends each year. We could go into each one line by line. We may very well come to the conclusion, and I say may, that we may want to direct staff in the end to say, look, we want to cut down some of our budget overall and could direct each department percentage-wise to look at reducing conference, seminar, training, and I don't have the number until we maybe get some more ideas as to what we do spend, but we could say cut it 5%, 10%, whatever.
Well,
That's one way to handle it, once we know what the costs are. I don't know what the costs are.
Well, if you want to keep it simple, Your Worship, I'd say we send it back to staff to reduce this budget and take a hard look at the stuff that we're asking the province to fund. And I'd be willing to make a motion to that effect, to send it back to staff and say, okay, bring it back with a reasonable increase. I don't know what Haldeman will think when they see it, but I have had some discussions with him, and it's out of their control. They say it's up to us.
Councillor Brun, this council certainly can give staff that direction with a majority vote if we
Okay.
want to send this budget back for further, when you use the word reasonable, I think we have to be a little bit more quantitative. My idea of reasonable may be a little bit different than yours, and that's okay.
Okay.
Or vice versa. So you've asked for some summary here. We haven't got it up yet, but it's coming.
Mr. Mayor, I think we're live here now. So if you can just give me an indication of what it is that you want to see, we'll see if we
Well, I like to start with materials and supplies at 481,000.
Okay.
484,